The first thing you needed to understand about Redemption Valley was that it had given up. Not overnight. Towns didn't die like men, quick and dramatic with a final breath and witnesses. Towns died slow, one boarded window at a time, one family packing their wagon in the pre-dawn dark, one more day of dust settling where conversation used to be. The second thing you needed to understand was that nobody cared anymore. Oh, there were still people. Maybe 200 souls, give or take, depending on whether you counted old Dutch Carmichael, who hadn't been seen in 3 weeks, but whose lamp still burned at night. The general store opened most days. The saloon never closed. Widow Patterson still baked bread on Thursdays, though fewer folks came to buy it. Life continued in the technical sense. Hearts beat, lungs filled, the sun made its daily arc across a sky so blue it hurt to look at. But hope? Hope had packed its bags around the same time the silver mine collapsed, taking 16 men and the town's future with it. The stranger walked in on a Tuesday afternoon when the heat was doing that thing it did in late August, pressing down on everything like God's own palm, making the air shimmer and waver so you couldn't quite trust what you were seeing. He came from the east, which meant he'd crossed 40 miles of nothing to get here, and he came on foot, which meant he was either desperate or stupid or something else entirely. Martha Henderson saw him first from her porch, where she sat shelling peas into a bowl that had belonged to her grandmother. She was 63 years old and had lived in Redemption Valley all her life, which meant she'd seen her share of strangers. This one made her hands stop moving. He wasn't big, average height, maybe a hair under 6 feet, lean in the way that spoke of hard miles rather than hunger. He wore dark trousers that had seen better days, a shirt that might have been white once, and a coat that was too heavy for the heat. His hat was pulled low, but not in that deliberate way men did when they were hiding. More like he'd forgotten it was there. But it was the way he moved that caught her attention and held it, steady, measured, each step the exact same length as the last. Not hurrying, but not wandering either, like a man walking a path he'd memorized in the dark. "Henry," she called to her husband inside, "come look at this." Henry Henderson had been the closest thing Redemption Valley had to a lawman before the town stopped being able to pay him. Now he fixed wagon wheels and tried not to think about the badge collecting dust in his desk drawer. He joined his wife on the porch, wiping his hands on a rag. "Well," he said after a moment. "Well, what?" "I don't know yet." They watched the stranger make his way down what used to be Main Street. He didn't look at the buildings, didn't seem to notice the peeling paint or the broken windows or the way the whole place leaned slightly to one left like a drunk trying to stay upright. He just walked, steady and deliberate, until he reached the saloon. Then he stopped. For maybe 10 seconds he stood there, perfectly still, and Martha felt something cold touch the base of her spine. The way he stood reminded her of something, but she couldn't quite grasp what. Then he pushed through the doors and disappeared inside. "You feel that?" Henry asked quietly. "Feel what?" "Like somebody just walked across my grave." Inside the saloon, it took the stranger's eyes a moment to adjust from the brutal sunlight to the permanent twilight of stale beer and older whiskey. 3 men sat at separate tables, each nursing a drink and their own thoughts. The bartender, a thick-shouldered man named Garrett, who'd once had dreams of opening a place in Denver, was washing glasses that were already clean because washing glasses was better than thinking. The stranger walked to the bar, not the end where most men stood, where they could keep their backs to the wall and watch the room. He stood right in the middle, which meant his back was exposed to the entire space. Either he was an idiot or he didn't care. "Whiskey," he said. His voice was quiet, roughed up around the edges like a road that had seen too much traffic. Garrett poured without comment. The stranger laid a coin on the bar, real silver, not scrip, and Garrett's eyebrows went up slightly. Real money had become a rare thing. The stranger took his drink to a table in the corner and sat with his back to the room. He didn't touch the whiskey, just sat there, absolutely still, staring at nothing. "That's odd," muttered Tom Crawford, one of the regulars. He was a former mine supervisor who now supervised nothing but his own descent into the bottle. "Man orders a drink and doesn't drink it." "Maybe he's gathering his thoughts," said Garrett, though he was watching the stranger too. "Man sits with his back to the door. He's either crazy or he knows something we don't," Tom said. "I've lived 52 years, and I can tell you—" The doors burst open. Young Billy Patterson practically fell through them, all skinny arms and legs, 12 years old and running full tilt. His face was flushed, eyes wide, and he was breathing hard enough that at first he couldn't speak. "Billy," Garrett said sharply, "your mama know you're in here?" The boy ignored him, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on the stranger. Something passed across his face, recognition maybe, or surprise, or something else, and he started forward. "Sir," Billy gasped out. "Sir, you need to—" "Boy," Tom Crawford interrupted, "you got no business talking to strangers." "But I seen—" "Out," Garrett said, not unkindly. "Go on now. This ain't a place for kids." Billy looked like he wanted to argue, but the tone in Garrett's voice was final. He shot one more look at the stranger, who still hadn't moved, hadn't even turned around, and then back toward the door. "You should leave," Billy said, directing the words at the stranger's back, "before they come back." Then he was gone, the doors swinging shut behind him. "Kid's got an imagination," Tom said. "Always has." But Garrett noticed that the stranger had moved, just slightly. His head had tilted maybe a degree to the right, like a dog catching a scent on the wind. The afternoon wore on. The stranger never touched his whiskey, never moved from his seat, just sat there like a man waiting for something he knew was coming. Outside, the sun began its slow slide toward the western horizon, and the shadows grew longer and the heat backed off enough that people started moving again. The street filled with the small movements of a dying town trying to pretend it was still alive. Horses at the water trough, a dog scratching in the dust, Widow Patterson opening her shop door to let some air through. And then from the east, the same direction the stranger had come from, came the sound of horses. Multiple horses, moving fast. Henry Henderson was sitting on his porch again, and he felt his stomach drop. He knew that sound, had heard it before. It was the sound of men who didn't care who heard them coming, because they didn't think anyone could stop them. 5 riders came around the bend in a cloud of dust, and Henry's stomach dropped further because he recognized the man in front. Cole Brennan, 23 years old and already carrying a reputation that stretched from here to the territories. Fast, mean, and worst of all, hungry for it. Not the money, not the fame, but the look in a man's eyes right before Cole put a bullet in him. That moment of realization, that moment of fear. Cole was tall, built like he'd been carved from stone by someone who knew what they were doing. He wore black from hat to boot, and his gun sat low on his hip, tied down the way gunfighters did. Pretty, in that dangerous way that drew attention and kept it. Blonde hair that fell just past his collar, bright blue eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that had no warmth in it whatsoever. The 4 men with him were various shades of hard and mean. Followers, mostly. Men who attached themselves to power because they had none of their own. They pulled up in front of the saloon, and Cole dismounted with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent more time on a horse than on his feet. He stood for a moment, looking up and down the street, and Henry could see him cataloging everything. The broken windows, the empty buildings, the way people had stopped what they were doing and were carefully not looking at him. "This the place?" one of the riders asked. "This is it," Cole said. His voice carried, smooth and cold. "Redemption Valley. More like Redemption Grave from the look of it." The men laughed, and the sound was wrong in the quiet street. Cole walked toward the saloon, and his men followed, and Henry Henderson sat on his porch and felt older than his 58 years. Inside the saloon, Garrett had gone very still. Tom Crawford had stopped mid-drink, his glass suspended halfway to his mouth. The other 2 regulars had shifted in their seats, suddenly very interested in the far wall. The stranger still hadn't moved. The doors opened, and Cole Brennan walked in, followed by his entourage. He stopped just inside, letting his eyes adjust, and then he smiled. "Well now," he said, "this is cozy." He walked to the bar, each step deliberate, his spurs chiming. "Whiskey, the good stuff, not what you serve these broken down—" He paused, noticing Tom. "No offense, friend." Tom said nothing. Garrett poured, his hand remarkably steady, considering. Cole took the glass and turned, leaning back against the bar, surveying the room. His gaze traveled across the space, dismissing Tom, dismissing the other regulars, dismissing... He stopped. His eyes had found the stranger sitting in the corner, still and quiet, facing away. Something passed across Cole's face. Not quite a frown, more like curiosity sharpened with an edge of irritation. "You," Cole said. The stranger didn't respond. Hey, Cole said louder. I'm talking to you, old man. Still nothing. The stranger sat motionless, and the silence in the room stretched thin and tight. One of Cole's men, a scarred man with dead eyes named Reese, started forward. Want me to teach him some, no, Cole said softly, and Reese stopped like he'd hit a wall. No, I'll handle this. He pushed off from the bar and walked toward the stranger, his boots loud on the wooden floor. When he reached the table, he stood there, looking down at the man's back. Must not hear so good, Cole said conversationally. That happens when you get old. Things stop working. Ears, eyes, hands. He paused. Especially hands. The stranger still didn't move. Cole reached out and knocked the whiskey glass off the table. It hit the floor and shattered, the sound sharp and final. Whoops, Cole said. How clumsy of me. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, so slowly it was almost painful to watch, the stranger stood up. He turned around, and Cole Brennan, who feared nothing and no one, felt something cold touch his spine. The man was old, not ancient, but old enough that the years showed in the lines around his eyes and the gray in his hair. Weathered, worn down. But his eyes were wrong. They were gray, almost silver in the dim light, and they looked at Cole with a kind of flat, distant patience that made Cole think of deep water, calm on the surface. God knew what underneath. You got a problem? The stranger asked quietly. Do I? Cole laughed, and his men joined in, but it sounded forced. Old man, you're sitting in my town, in my saloon, and you've been disrespecting me since I walked in. Your town, the stranger repeated, not a question, just words being tested for weight. That's right. Me and my boys, we've decided Redemption Valley needs some new management, some protection, some leadership. Cole stepped closer. So when I talk, you answer. When I tell you to do something, you do it. You understand? The stranger looked at him for a long moment, and Cole had the sudden unnerving feeling that he was being measured against something and found wanting. No, the stranger said. The word hung in the air like gun smoke. No? Cole repeated. He wasn't smiling anymore. No, the stranger said again. I don't understand. See, I came here to have a quiet drink and be left alone. Didn't come here to bow and scrape for some boy who thinks carrying a gun makes him a man. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Cole's hand moved toward his gun, not drawing, just touching the grip. A statement. A reminder. You got a name, old man? Used to. That's supposed to be clever? Just a fact. Cole studied him, and the cold feeling in his spine was spreading. There was something about this man, something in the way he stood, perfectly balanced, weight distributed just so. Something in the way his right hand hung loose at his side, not tense, not ready, just there. You carrying? Cole asked. No. No gun? No gun. Cole smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Well, that's just stupid. Walking around unarmed in times like these. He looked at his men. That's asking for trouble, ain't it, boys? They agreed it was. Cole turned back to the stranger. Tell you what, I'm feeling generous today. You apologize for your disrespect, buy me and my boys around, and we'll forget this happened. How's that sound? Sounds like something a man would say when he's trying to convince himself he's in charge, the stranger said. One of Cole's men sucked in a breath. Garrett, behind the bar, closed his eyes. Cole's face went very still. Say that again. You heard me the first time. Old man, I don't think you understand the situation you're in. I understand it fine. You're young, fast, and mean. You've killed some men, and that's made you feel powerful. Now you're going town to town, finding places too weak to fight back, taking what you want. It's a pattern. Seen it before. Have you now? More times than I care to count. Cole laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what I think? I think you're all talk. I think you're some washed-up nobody trying to feel important one last time before you die. I think I think you should walk away, the stranger interrupted. The silence that followed was absolute. What did you just say to me? Walk away. You and your boys, mount up, ride out, find some other place to make miserable. This town's already dying. It doesn't need your help. Cole's face had gone white, then red. You threatening me? No, advising you. I don't need advice from some old fool with no gun and no sense. Cole's hand was on his pistol now, gripping it. You know what I think? I think you need to be taught a lesson. I think you need to learn your place. My place, the stranger said softly, is standing. Yours is learning when to quit while you're ahead. Cole drew. He was fast. Blindingly fast. The kind of fast that comes from practice and natural talent and the absolute certainty that you're faster than anyone else. His gun was up and aimed before most men could blink. But the stranger didn't blink. He didn't move at all. He just stood there, looking at Cole with those flat gray eyes, and after a moment he spoke. You gonna shoot me? Cole's hand was steady. The gun didn't waver, but something in his face had changed. Give me a reason not to. Can't think of one you'd accept. Try me. The stranger seemed to consider this, because killing an unarmed man in front of witnesses is murder, even out here, because you're better than that, even if you don't know it yet, because that gun in your hand is just a tool, and tools don't make you strong, they just make you loud. You done? Not quite, because the moment you pull that trigger, you stop being a man with choices and start being a man with consequences, and because the stranger's voice dropped even lower. Because I asked you to. They stood there frozen, and Garrett found himself holding his breath. Tom Crawford had his hand on his own gun, though what he planned to do with it, he had no idea. The stranger was unarmed. This was going to be murder, plain and simple, and there was nothing. Cole lowered his gun, not holstered it, just lowered it until it pointed at the floor. What's your name? He asked again, and this time there was something different in his voice. Something like respect or fear, or maybe recognition. Doesn't matter. It matters to me. The stranger shook his head slightly. Another time, maybe. He walked past Cole, past his men, and out the door. Didn't hurry, didn't look back, just walked out into the fading light like nothing had happened. Cole stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway. Then he holstered his gun and turned to Garrett. Who the hell was that? Garrett shook his head. Don't know. Never seen him before today. Cole looked at Tom. You? No idea, Tom said. But I'll tell you something. I've been around a long time, and I've never seen anyone stand up to a drawn gun like that, not without one of their own. Cole's jaw tightened. He looked at his men. Find out who he is. I want to know everything. Where he came from, where he's staying, what he had for breakfast. Everything. You want us to... Reese made a gesture. No, Cole said sharply. No, not yet. I want information first. He walked out and his men followed, and after they were gone, Garrett let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Tom, he said. Yeah? What the hell just happened? I don't know, Tom said slowly, but I got a feeling we're going to find out. Outside, the stranger walked down the street as the sun touched the horizon. He didn't look hurried. Didn't look worried. He just walked, steady and measured, until he reached the boarding house at the edge of town. Mrs. Chen, who ran the place, looked up as he entered. She was a small woman with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen enough to know better than to ask too many questions. You need a room? If you have one. Cash only. He laid coins on the desk and she counted them with quick, efficient fingers. Then she handed him a key. Room 3. Upstairs, second door on the right. Breakfast is at 6 if you want it. No fighting, no drinking, no bringing trouble home with you. Fair terms. Had to make them up, she said dryly. Trouble seems to follow people whether they invite it or not. Seems that way. He climbed the stairs slowly, like each step required thought. When he reached his room, he opened the door, stepped inside, and locked it behind him. The room was small and plain, a bed, a washstand. A window that looked out over the street. He moved to the window and stood there, looking out at the dying town as darkness fell. Behind him, on the bed, a small boy materialized. Not really. Billy Patterson had been hiding under the bed, which took some doing given how small the space was. Sir, Billy whispered urgently. Sir, you gotta listen. The stranger turned around slowly. How'd you get in here? Window. I'm good at climbing. Billy scrambled to his feet. Listen, those men, the one in black especially, They're dangerous. They killed a man in Silverbrook, shot him down for looking at them wrong. They're saying they're going to take over the town, make everyone pay for protection, and anyone who doesn't, I know what they're going to do," the stranger said quietly. "Then why'd you make him mad? Why'd you—" Billy stopped, his eyes going wide. "You did it on purpose. You wanted him to draw on you." The stranger didn't answer. "But why? You don't even have a gun. He could have killed you." "Could have," the stranger agreed. Billy stared at him, trying to make sense of it. "I don't understand." "Don't need to. Go home, boy. It's getting dark and your mother will worry. She thinks I'm at the Hendersons." "Then go to the Hendersons. But go." Billy hesitated, and something complicated passed across his young face. "You're not just some old drifter, are you? I seen the way you moved, the way you stood. My dad, before he died, he used to tell me about men like you. Gunfighters, the real ones, not the ones who just talk loud and shoot fast. He said you could always tell them by the way they didn't need to prove nothing." The stranger walked to the door and opened it. "Good night, Billy." The boy left reluctantly, and the stranger closed the door behind him. Then he moved back to the window and stood there, watching the street below. A few minutes later, Cole Brennan and his men rode past. They'd been to the saloon, to the general store, to the boarding house where they'd taken rooms, marking territory, claiming what they thought was theirs. The stranger watched them pass, and his expression never changed. But his right hand, hanging loose at his side, made a small unconscious movement, fingers flexing, testing, remembering. Then he caught himself and forced the hand still. In the street below, a dog barked. A door slammed. The wind picked up, carrying dust and the smell of coming rain that would never arrive. And in room 3 of Mrs. Chen's boarding house, a man who'd been trying very hard to stop being who he was stood by the window and felt the weight of the past settling back onto his shoulders like an old coat he'd thought he'd thrown away. Because the truth was simple and terrible. You could run from your reputation, but you couldn't run from yourself. And sooner or later, the man you used to be would find you again, even in a dying town at the edge of nowhere, even when you were trying to be someone else. Especially then, the stranger, who used to have a name, who used to have a reputation, who used to be someone people crossed the street to avoid, closed his eyes and tried to remember why he'd stopped in Redemption Valley in the first place. He couldn't. Maybe it had just looked like a place where a man could disappear. Maybe it had just looked like the end of the road. Or maybe, and this was the thought that kept him awake when he should have been sleeping, maybe some part of him had known what was coming, had known that running was over, had known that eventually you had to stop and turn around and face the thing you'd been running from, even if that thing was yourself. Outside, the night deepened, and Redemption Valley settled into uneasy sleep. But in room 3, the stranger stood by the window until dawn, watching and waiting, because that's what he'd always done. Watch, wait, survive. And when necessary, though he'd tried so hard for it not to be necessary, remember exactly who he used to be. The fastest gun west of anywhere. The man they called a ghost because he appeared and disappeared and left only bodies in his wake. The legend that wouldn't die no matter how hard he tried to kill it. He had a name once. Everyone did. But names were dangerous things, and some names were more dangerous than most. So, for now, he was just the stranger. And if Cole Brennan wanted to know more than that, well, he'd find out soon enough. They always did. Dawn came to Redemption Valley the way it always did, reluctant and pale, like it knew there wasn't much worth illuminating. The stranger watched it arrive from his window, his eyes gritty from lack of sleep, but his mind sharp in that particular way that exhaustion sometimes brings. Everything felt slightly unreal, slightly heightened, like the world had been turned up a notch. He'd spent the night running through scenarios, old habits, mapping exits, counting threats, calculating angles and timing. The kind of thinking he'd promised himself he was done with. Promises were easier to make than keep. Around 5:30, he heard Mrs. Chen moving around downstairs, the familiar sounds of someone starting a kitchen, water being pumped, a stove being lit, the clatter of pans, normal sounds, the kind that made you think the world was safe and predictable. He knew better. By 6, he was downstairs, drawn by the smell of coffee that was stronger than it was good, but better than nothing. The dining room was small, just 4 tables, and he was the only guest. Mrs. Chen brought him eggs and biscuits without asking if he wanted them. "You eat," she said. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Too many men think they can run on coffee and stubbornness." She paused, studying him with those sharp eyes. "You planning to make trouble in my town?" "No, ma'am. But trouble's going to find you anyway." He looked up at her, surprised. She shrugged. "I've been running this place 30 years. You learn to read people. You got the look of a man who's done running but hasn't figured out what comes next." She poured his coffee. "Those boys who rode in yesterday, they got a different look. They're still hungry. Hungry's more dangerous than tired." "Usually is. So what happens when hungry meets tired?" "Depends on who's smarter." "And who is?" He took a sip of coffee. It was terrible. "We'll find out." She left him alone after that, and he ate mechanically, fueling the machine of his body the way he'd learned to do years ago. Food wasn't about enjoyment, it was about being ready. He was finishing his second cup of coffee when Billy Patterson appeared in the doorway, breathing hard like he'd been running. "Sir," the boy gasped. "Sir, you gotta come. They're at the general store and Mr. Calloway. He tried to stand up to them and—" The stranger was on his feet and moving before Billy finished the sentence. He didn't run, but his walk had purpose behind it now, each step carrying him forward with the kind of momentum that was hard to stop. The general store was 3 buildings down, and he could hear the commotion before he saw it. Raised voices. Something breaking. The high, frightened sound of someone trying not to cry. A small crowd had gathered outside, but no one was doing anything. They just stood there, watching, the way people do when they've learned that getting involved only gets you hurt. The stranger pushed through them and stepped inside. The store was a mess. Shelves had been knocked over, their contents spilled across the floor. Sacks of flour had been slashed open, white powder dusting everything like snow. In the middle of it all stood James Calloway, the store's owner, a thin man in his 50s with hands that shook and eyes that had given up. Reese, the scarred man from Cole's crew, had him by the shirt front, holding him up against the counter. 2 of the other men were helping themselves to supplies, loading their arms with canned goods and tobacco. "I told you," Reese was saying, his voice almost conversational. "Protection costs money. You want us to keep you safe, you pay. Simple business." "I don't have any money," Calloway said, and his voice cracked on the words. "The mine closed. Nobody's buying. I barely have enough to—" Reese hit him, not hard enough to knock him out, just hard enough to hurt. Calloway's head snapped to the side and blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Then you'll give us goods," Reese said. "Fair trade." "That's not fair. That's robbery." Reese drew back his fist again, and the stranger spoke. "Let him go." The temperature in the room shifted. Reese froze mid-swing and turned slowly. When he saw who'd spoken, something ugly crossed his face. "You," he said. "Old man from yesterday. You got a death wish or something?" "Just a preference for fair fights." "This is a fair fight. 3 against 1. Seems fair to me." 3 armed men against 1 shopkeeper. The stranger's voice was flat. "That's not a fight. That's just bullying." One of the other men, younger, with a nervous laugh, spoke up. "Maybe you didn't hear, old-timer. This town's under new management. We're the law now." "Law requires consent of the governed," the stranger said. "Don't see much consent here." Reese let go of Calloway, who sagged against the counter. "You know what your problem is? You don't know when to keep your mouth shut. Cole was willing to let you walk yesterday." "Me? I'm not Cole." He started forward, and his 2 companions spread out to flank him. Standard pack tactics. Surround, overwhelm, make sure the target has nowhere to run. But the stranger didn't move to run. He shifted his weight slightly, settling into a stance that looked casual but wasn't. Balanced, ready. "Last chance," Reese said. "Walk away, mind your business, and maybe you live to see tomorrow." "Can't do that." "Why the hell not?" "Because," the stranger said quietly, "someone has to." Reese came at him fast, throwing a heavy right hand that would have taken the stranger's head off if it connected. But it didn't connect. The stranger moved his head just enough, let the fist whistle past his ear, and then he was inside Reese's guard. What happened next took maybe 3 seconds, but would be talked about in Redemption Valley for years after. The stranger's elbow came up and caught Reese in the solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. As Reese doubled over, the stranger's knee came up and met his face with a sound like wood breaking. Reese went down hard, blood pouring from his nose. The younger man with the nervous laugh pulled a knife and lunged. The stranger caught his wrist, twisted, and the knife clattered to the floor. A quick palm strike to the chest sent the young man stumbling backward into a shelf, which collapsed on top of him. The third man was smarter. He went for his gun. But the stranger was already moving. He closed the distance before the gun cleared leather, his hand snapping out to grab the man's gun arm. There was a brief, brutal struggle, and then the stranger did something with his grip that made the man scream and drop the weapon. A sweep of the leg put him on his back, and the stranger's boot came down on his gun hand. Not hard enough to break anything, just hard enough to make a point. Then it was over. 3 men down. The stranger standing over them, breathing slightly harder than before, but otherwise unmarked. In the doorway, the crowd that had gathered was dead silent. "Now," the stranger said, looking down at Reese, who was trying to get his breath back. "You're going to take your friends and leave. You're going to tell Cole what happened, and you're going to think very carefully about whether this is really how you want to spend your days." Reese spat blood. "You're dead. You know that? Cole's going to kill you for this." "Maybe," the stranger allowed, "but not today." He stepped back, giving them room. Reese hauled himself to his feet, collected his men, and they limped out of the store. The crowd parted for them like water around stones. After they were gone, Calloway let out a breath he'd been holding. I can't. Thank you doesn't seem. Don't thank me yet, the stranger said. That just made things worse. Worse? How could it be worse? You stopped them. For now. But they'll be back. With more men. Angrier. He looked around at the mess. You got somewhere else you can go? Family out of town? Calloway shook his head. This is all I have. The store, the building. I lose this, I lose everything. The stranger nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. Then you'd better board up the windows and don't open up until this is settled. Settled how? One way or another. He walked out into the street and the crowd was still there, but now they were looking at him differently. Not with fear exactly. Something more complicated. Like they wanted to believe he could help but knew better than to hope. Henry Henderson pushed through the group. That was either the bravest thing I've seen or the stupidest. Probably both, the stranger said. Cole's not going to let this go. I know. You got a plan? Working on it. Henry studied him for a long moment. You're not just passing through, are you? This wasn't just you being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The stranger didn't answer. Who are you? Henry asked, and there was something in his voice that said he already suspected. Really? Before the stranger could respond, a voice called out from down the street. Hey! Cole Brennan was standing outside the saloon, and even from a distance you could see the rage in his posture. He started walking toward them, and his remaining men fell in behind him like shadows. The crowd scattered. Within seconds, the street was empty except for Henry, the stranger, and Cole's approaching group. You should go inside, the stranger said to Henry. This is my town. Was my job to protect it before... Henry stopped. I'm not running. Wasn't asking you to run, just asking you to not be in the crossfire. If there's going to be crossfire, seems like you're going to need someone watching your back. The stranger glanced at him, something almost like surprise crossing his face. You don't even know me. Know enough. Know you stood up when no one else would. Know you helped Calloway when you didn't have to. That's more than most would do. Cole was close now, maybe 30 feet away. He stopped, and his men fanned out behind him. 5 of them, including Cole. The stranger counted them out of habit, calculating angles and possibilities. You made a mistake, Cole called out. His voice was tight, controlled, but there was fury underneath. You put your hands on my men. That's disrespect I can't allow. They were roughing up an unarmed shopkeeper, the stranger said. Seemed like someone needed to do something about it. Someone like you? An old man with no gun? Cole laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think because you got lucky in a fist fight that makes you dangerous? Don't think anything, just did what needed doing. Cole's hand moved toward his gun, and every person watching from behind closed doors or drawn curtains held their breath. I'm going to give you one more chance, Cole said. 1. Get on your knees. Apologize. Beg my forgiveness. Do that, and maybe I let you crawl out of town. And if I don't, then we find out if you can dodge bullets as well as you dodge punches. The stranger stood there, perfectly still, and for a moment it seemed like he was considering it. Then he spoke, and his voice carried across the empty street. You really want to do this? More than anything. In front of witnesses? In broad daylight? I want everyone to see, Cole said. I want everyone to know what happens when you disrespect me. The stranger nodded slowly. All right then, but not like this. Not like what? You got 5 guns, I got none. You want to make this a lesson, make it a fair one. You and me, nobody else. Tomorrow at noon, in the street. The stranger paused. If you've got the stones for it. Cole went very still. You challenging me to a duel? I'm offering you a chance to prove you're more than just a bully with friends. The silence that followed was absolute. Behind Cole, his men shifted nervously. In the buildings around them, people pressed closer to windows. Cole smiled, and it was the coldest thing anyone there had ever seen. You're serious. As death. You don't even have a gun. I'll get one. From where? The old man doesn't have anything worth... Cole stopped, and his eyes narrowed. Unless you're planning to ask someone to lend you theirs, which means you know how to use one, which means you're not just some drifter. The stranger didn't respond. Cole studied him, really looked at him for the first time, taking in the way he stood, the way his hand hung at his side, the absolute calm in his eyes. And slowly, something dawned on Cole's face. Not quite recognition, not quite fear, but something close to both. Who are you? He asked, and his voice had changed. Someone who's giving you a chance to walk away. I don't walk away. Then tomorrow at noon, the stranger said. Just you and me. Fair fight. Winner takes the town. Loser. He shrugged. Well, Cole licked his lips. He didn't want to, but he did it anyway. Some unconscious tell that he was actually nervous. And if I say no? Then everyone here knows you're afraid of an old, unarmed man. The trap snapped shut so smoothly that Cole didn't even realize he'd stepped in it until too late. If he walked away now, he looked like a coward. If he accepted, he was putting everything on the line against an unknown opponent. But he couldn't walk away. Not now. Not with everyone watching. Fine, Cole said, and his voice was hard. Tomorrow, noon. But when this is over, when you're bleeding out in the dirt, I want your last thought to be that you did this to yourself. Fair enough, the stranger said. Cole turned and walked away, his men following. But before they'd gone more than a few steps, he looked back over his shoulder. I'm going to find out who you are, he said, before tomorrow. I'm going to know everything about you. Good luck with that. After they were gone, Henry let out a breath. You just bet your life on a draw you can't win. Maybe. There's no maybe about it. Cole's fast, maybe the fastest I've ever seen. And you just gave him 24 hours to get faster and meaner. Henry grabbed the stranger's arm. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking that if I didn't give him a target, he'd take it out on the town, on people like Calloway, on anyone who looked at him wrong. The stranger pulled his arm free gently. This way, it's just me. It's suicide. Probably. Then why? Henry stopped, and understanding crossed his face. You're not planning to win, are you? You're planning to make a point. The stranger didn't answer, but he didn't have to. The look in his eyes said everything. That's the stupidest plan I've ever heard, Henry said, but his voice had softened, and maybe the bravest. Billy Patterson came running up, his face flushed. That was amazing. Did you see how fast? And then and they couldn't even... Billy, Henry said sharply, go home. But now. The boy left reluctantly, looking back over his shoulder every few steps. Other people were starting to emerge from their hiding spots, drawn by curiosity and something that might have been hope. Martha Henderson appeared on her porch. Henry, what in the name of... Not now, Martha. Don't you not now me. That young man just challenged someone to a gunfight. In our street. Tomorrow. I know. And you're just going to let it happen? Henry turned to her, and the exhaustion in his face made him look 10 years older. What do you want me to do? I'm not a lawman anymore. Haven't been for 2 years. And even if I was, what would I do? Arrest them both? Cole would shoot me before I got the cuffs out. Then get help. Ride to the next town. Find the marshal. Nearest marshal is 3 days away. And you think he's going to come running for a town that can't even pay its own way? Henry shook his head. No. This is what we got. Him. He gestured at the stranger. One old man who's either crazy or knows something we don't. I'm betting on crazy, Martha muttered. But she was looking at the stranger with something like respect. The stranger ignored the conversation and started walking. He needed to think. Needed to plan. Needed to figure out if there was any way this ended without him dead in the street. He made it maybe 10 steps before Tom Crawford intercepted him. Hold up, Tom said. He looked sober for once, his eyes clear. That thing you did back there, with Reese and his boys? I seen men fight before. Hell, I was in the war. But that wasn't just fighting, that was... He searched for the word. Professional. Just got lucky. Luck doesn't move like that. Luck doesn't put 3 men down in the time it takes to sneeze. Tom stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're him, aren't you? The one they used to talk about, from back in the day. Don't know what you're talking about. The hell you don't. I heard stories. About a man who was so fast, people said he could draw and fire before you even saw his hand move. They said he retired years ago, disappeared. Some folks thought he was dead. Tom's eyes were bright. But he's not dead, is he? He's standing right here. The stranger looked at him for a long moment. Stories are just stories, Tom. Most of them are lies, and the rest are exaggerations. So you're saying you're not him? I'm saying it doesn't matter who I was. Only matters who I am now. And who are you now? Someone trying very hard not to be who I was. Tom nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you're making a mistake. Taking on Cole straight up. Even if you are who I think you are, that was a long time ago. Hands slow down, eyes get worse, and Cole's young and hungry and mean. I know. So why do it? Because someone has to. That's a damn fool reason to die. Maybe, the stranger said. But it's the only one I got. He continued walking, leaving Tom standing in the street looking troubled. When he reached Mrs. Chen's boarding house, he found her waiting on the porch. I heard what happened, she said. News travels fast. News that stupid travels faster. She crossed her arms. You planning to pay for your room through the week, or should I refund you for the days you won't be using? Despite everything, the stranger almost smiled. I'll pay through the week. Optimist or fool? Little bit of both, probably. She shook her head. Men, always thinking they can solve everything with violence. Not trying to solve anything, just trying to make sure it doesn't get worse. And dying accomplishes that how? Maybe it doesn't, he admitted. But living as a coward accomplishes even less. Mrs. Chen studied him, and something shifted in her expression. You really think you can beat him? Honestly, I don't know. Been a long time since He trailed off. Let's just say the odds aren't in my favor. Then why fight? Because if I don't, he'll hurt more people. Maybe kill them, and I've got enough blood on my conscience without adding theirs. She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She handed it to him. My husband's gun, she said. He was a lawman before we came here. Died 15 years ago, but I kept it, cleaned it, oiled it, just in case. The stranger unwrapped the cloth slowly. The gun was a Colt Peacemaker, well-maintained but old. Not fancy, just functional. He hefted it, felt the weight, checked the action. It was good, solid. I can't... Yes, you can, she said firmly. You're going to need it, and frankly, I'd rather see it used to protect people than sit in my drawer for another 15 years. Mrs. Chen, take it. And don't you dare die tomorrow, you hear me? I don't want to have to clean your blood off my porch. He looked at her, and for a moment something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or just the recognition that they were both survivors of different wars. Thank you, he said quietly. Don't thank me yet. Thank me after you win. He went inside and up to his room. The gun felt strange in his hand, foreign and familiar at the same time, like putting on old clothes you'd forgotten you owned. He spent the next hour relearning the weight of it, the balance, drawing it from where he'd need to carry it. The movements felt rusty, awkward, muscle memory trying to surface through years of rust. A knock on the door interrupted him. "It's open," he called. Henry Henderson stepped inside. He looked at the gun in the stranger's hand and nodded. "Good. You'll need that." "So I've been told." Henry closed the door behind him. "Listen, I've been thinking, this doesn't have to be a fair fight. We could set something up, a distraction, someone on a roof with a rifle." "No." "But no," the stranger repeated. "I gave my word it would be just us. I break that. I'm no better than them. You'd be alive." "There's more important things than being alive." Henry sat down heavily on the single chair. "You know, when I wore a badge, I told myself I was protecting people, keeping them safe. But the truth is, I was just trying to feel like I mattered, like what I did made a difference." He looked up. "Does it make a difference, I mean? All the fighting and dying and trying to hold back the tide?" "I don't know if," the stranger said honestly. "Some days I think it does. Other days I think we're all just pretending. So why bother?" "Because pretending is better than giving up." They sat in silence for a while, and outside the sun climbed higher, marking the passage of time toward tomorrow's reckoning. Finally, Henry spoke again. "I never asked your name." The stranger was quiet for so long that Henry thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, very softly, "Ethan Wade." Henry's breath caught. "The Ethan Wade? The one from Yeah. But you're supposed to be dead. Everyone said you died years ago, shot down by—" "Didn't die. Just stopped being that person." Ethan set the gun down carefully. "Or tried to, anyway. Turns out you can't really kill who you were. Best you can do is run from it. And now? Now I'm done running." Henry looked at him with something like awe. "You're really him. The stories, the things they said you did." "Most of the stories are wrong," Ethan said flatly. "The real story's worse. But you can beat Cole if you're really, maybe, if my hands remember what they used to know, if my eyes are still good enough, if I'm not too slow or too old or too broken." Ethan picked up the gun again, stared at it. "That's a lot of ifs. But you're going to try." "Yeah, I'm going to try." Henry stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Even if it ends badly tomorrow, at least someone stood up." After he left, Ethan returned to practicing, drawing the gun, feeling the weight, trying to find the rhythm he'd lost. But it was like trying to remember a dream. The harder he grasped for it, the more it slipped away. By the time the sun set, his shoulder ached and his hand trembled slightly. Not from fear, from exhaustion, from trying to resurrect skills that had been buried for too long. He lay on the bed fully clothed, the gun beside him, and watched darkness fill the room. Tomorrow would come whether he was ready or not. And when it did, one way or another, everything would change. For him, for Cole, for Redemption Valley. The only question was how many of them would survive to see what came after. Sleep never came. Ethan lay on the narrow bed and watched the ceiling fade from black to gray as morning crept in through the window. His body wanted rest, but his mind wouldn't cooperate. It kept running through the draw, over and over, analyzing every possible variation. Cole would be fast, young fast. The kind of speed that came from practice and confidence, and a body that hadn't been worn down by decades of use. Ethan's hands felt heavy, foreign, like they belonged to someone else. Around 5, he gave up pretending and sat at the edge of the bed, the Colt in his lap. He field stripped it in the dark, hands moving through the familiar motions. Barrel, cylinder, frame, each piece coming apart like a puzzle he'd solved 1,000 times before. Then back together. Click. Slide. Lock. The repetition was supposed to be calming, supposed to center him. It wasn't working. By 6, he was downstairs. Mrs. Chen was already in the kitchen, and she looked up when he entered but didn't say anything. Just poured him coffee and set it in front of him along with a plate of eggs he didn't want. "Eat," she said. "Not hungry." "Eat anyway. Empty stomach makes you shake." He ate because arguing took more energy than he had. The eggs tasted like dust. Everything tasted like dust. "My husband used to get like this," Mrs. Chen said, wiping down the counter, even though it was already clean. "Before, when he knew something bad was coming, he'd get this look in his eyes like he was already somewhere else." "Where is he now?" Dead 15 years. Shot trying to stop a robbery. She didn't look up. He was fast, too. Faster than anyone I'd seen. Wasn't fast enough. Ethan set down his fork. You trying to make me feel better or worse? Neither. Just telling you the truth. Being fast doesn't mean you're invincible. Means you live longer than most, that's all. That's enough sometimes. Is it? She finally looked at him. Because from where I'm standing, you look like a man who's tired of living longer, who's ready to cash out. Maybe I am. Then you're a fool. Dying's easy. It's living that takes courage. Before he could respond, the front door opened and Billy Patterson slipped inside. His face was pale, eyes too wide, and he was breathing like he'd been running. They're getting ready, Billy gasped out. Cole and his men. They're at the saloon, and Cole's been practicing. I watched through the window. He's so fast, Mr. Wade. His hand it's like a blur. You can't even see it move. Billy, Mrs. Chen said sharply, what are you doing here? Your mother? Ma thinks I'm at the Hendersons helping with their fence. Billy came closer, his young face desperate. Mr. Wade, you can't fight him. You'll die. Everyone knows it. Then why are you here? Ethan asked quietly. Because, Billy's voice cracked. Because nobody else stood up. Nobody else tried. And if you die trying, that's still better than everyone just letting it happen. Ethan looked at the boy for a long moment. 12 years old and already learning that the world was cruel and the good guys didn't always win. Too young for that lesson. Everyone was too young for that lesson. Go home, Billy. But go home. Watch from inside. Stay safe. That's how you help. Billy's eyes filled with tears he was trying hard not to shed. It's not fair. No, Ethan agreed. It's not. The boy left, and the silence that followed was heavier than before. Mrs. Chen went back to her cleaning, and Ethan finished his coffee, and outside the town slowly woke up to the last morning one of them would see. Around 8, Henry Henderson arrived with a gun belt. Old but well-maintained, the leather soft from use. Figured you'd need this, Henry said, setting it on the table. Belonged to my father. It'll fit the Colt. Ethan picked it up, felt the weight. You don't have to help. This isn't your fight. That's where you're wrong. This stopped being just your fight the moment Cole rode into my town and started pushing people around. Henry sat down across from him. I wore a badge once, took an oath. That oath didn't expire just because the town stopped paying me. Oaths don't stop bullets. No, but they give you a reason to stand when everything in you wants to run. Ethan strapped on his gun belt, adjusting it until it sat right on his hip. The weight felt wrong at first, then familiar, like muscle memory kicking in after a long sleep. You told me your name last night, Henry said. Now I'm going to tell you something. I know who you are. Know what you did. Read about you in the papers back in the day. The things they said you'd done. Most of it was exaggerated. Maybe. But here's what I know for sure. You're the only chance this town's got. And I don't care if your hands shake or if you're not as fast as you used to be. You're still more man than Cole will ever be. Being a man doesn't win gunfights. No, but it's worth more when the smoke clears. They sat in silence for a while, and then Henry stood. I'll be out there, in case things go wrong. They'll go wrong, Ethan said. Question is how wrong? After Henry left, Ethan went back upstairs. 2 hours until noon. 2 hours to find the man he used to be somewhere in the ruins of who he'd become. He stood in front of the small mirror and practiced the draw. The Colt felt too heavy, then too light, then just right. His hand moved slowly at first, then faster. But it wasn't fast enough, wasn't smooth enough. The timing was off, the rhythm broken. He'd been retired too long, tried too hard to forget, and now he was going to pay for it. Around 10:30, Tom Crawford knocked on the door. When Ethan opened it, Tom was holding a bottle of whiskey. Thought you might want this, Tom said. Dutch courage and all that? Don't drink before a fight. Smart. I never was. Tom came in anyway, uninvited but not unwelcome. He sat down and opened the bottle, took a long pull. Want to know something funny? When I was young, I used to read those dime novels about gunfighters. Thought it was all romantic, honorable men facing each other down. Fastest hand wins, good triumphs, that kind of thing. It's not like that. Yeah, I figured that out. Usually around the time I watched a 16-year-old kid die from an infected gut wound because some drunk shot him over a card game. Tom took another drink. There's nothing romantic about dying. No, There's not. So why do it? Why stand out there and let Cole kill you? Ethan checked the Colt's cylinder for the 10th time. All 6 chambers loaded. Because if I don't, he wins. He takes the town, bleeds it dry, hurts people. And eventually someone else tries to stop him. Someone slower, someone less prepared. And they die too. So you're dying to prevent someone else from dying. That's some backwards logic. Maybe. But it's all I got. Tom nodded slowly. You know what? I think I finally understand those dime novels. The heroes weren't brave because they knew they'd win. They were brave because they knew they might not. That's not bravery. That's just stubbornness. Sometimes they're the same thing. Tom left the bottle and walked out, and Ethan stared at it for a long moment before pushing it away. He didn't need his senses dulled. Didn't need anything making this harder than it already was. 11 o'clock came and went. The town had gone quiet. Not the normal quiet of afternoon rest, the tense quiet of people waiting for something terrible to happen. Ethan strapped on the gun belt and checked his reflection one last time. He looked old, tired, like a man who'd already lost. Maybe he had. He went downstairs. Mrs. Chen was waiting by the door. "You're really doing this," she said. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am." "You're a fool." "Been called worse." She reached out and adjusted his collar, a gesture so maternal it caught him off guard. "My husband died doing the right thing. Didn't make it hurt less. Didn't make me less angry at him for leaving." Her hands dropped. "But I was proud too. Still am. So if you're going to be a fool, at least be a brave one." "I'll try." "And try not to die. I meant what I said about the blood on my porch." He almost smiled. Almost. Then he stepped outside into the late morning sun. The street was empty. Every door closed, every window shuttered, but he could feel them watching, the whole town holding its breath. He walked toward the center of town where Main Street widened into something that had once been a proper square. His boots made soft sounds in the dust. His hand hung loose at his side. Not tense, not ready. Just there. The closer he got, the louder his heartbeat became. Not from fear, from anticipation. From the knowledge that in a few minutes, everything would be decided. One way or another. Cole was already there, standing in the middle of the street with his men spread out behind him. He'd dressed for the occasion, all black, gun belt polished, hat at just the right angle. He looked like something out of a painting. Young death, pretty and terrible. When he saw Ethan approaching, he smiled. "Wasn't sure you'd show," Cole called out. "Thought maybe you'd come to your senses." "Here I am." "Yes, you are." Cole studied him, taking in the gun belt, the Colt, the way Ethan moved. "You know, I spent all night asking around about you, about who you were. Nobody knew anything. It's like you don't exist." "Maybe I don't. Or maybe you're just nobody important." Cole's smile widened. "Which makes this even easier." Ethan stopped about 40 feet away. Standard dueling distance, close enough to see your opponent's eyes, far enough to have a chance. "Your men gonna stay out of this?" Ethan asked. "They will." Cole glanced back at them. "Won't you, boys?" They nodded, but Ethan didn't trust it, didn't trust any of them. When this went bad, and it would go bad, they'd likely shoot him regardless of any agreement. But that was a problem for later, if there was a later. "How do you want to do this?" Cole asked. "Count of 3? Walk and turn? Or just straight draw?" "Your choice." "Generous of you. Let's keep it simple then. Straight draw. You ready?" "As I'll ever be." Cole's hand moved toward his gun, not drawing yet, just resting near it. "Any last words? Something profound, maybe? Something for them to remember you by?" "No." "Nothing? Not even a goodbye to whoever's watching?" "They know." Cole laughed. "Fair enough. On 3 then. 1. Behind Ethan, a door opened. Small, quiet, but enough to make Cole's eyes flicker past Ethan's shoulder. It was enough. Ethan moved. Not fast. Not yet. Just a half step to the side, weight shifting, hand dropping toward the Colt. Testing, measuring, seeing if the muscle memory was still there buried somewhere under years of rust. Cole's hand blurred toward his gun. And that's when everything slowed down. It was a trick of perception, something Ethan had experienced 100 times before in situations like this. Time didn't actually slow. Your mind just sped up, processing everything in crystalline detail. The way Cole's coat lifted as he drew, the slight widening of his eyes, the way his thumb caught the hammer on the way up. Fast, incredibly fast, faster than most men Ethan had faced. But Ethan had already seen it, had read the intent in Cole's eyes a half-second before his hand moved, had started his own draw not from the motion, but from the thought behind it. The Colt cleared leather. Ethan's thumb cocked the hammer. His arm came up, weight balanced, eyes sighting down the barrel through instinct, not thought. Cole's gun leveled. 2 shots rang out so close together they almost sounded like one. Almost. Ethan felt the impact before he heard the sound. Something punched him in the left shoulder, spinning him slightly, hot and immediate. He stumbled but kept his feet, his gun still up, still steady. Across from him, Cole stood frozen. His gun was extended, smoke curling from the barrel, but his face had gone white. He looked down. There was blood spreading across his right side, just below the ribs. Not a killing shot, not immediately, but deep enough, bad enough. Cole's gun dropped from suddenly nerveless fingers. He pressed his hand to the wound, and it came away red. "You," he said, and his voice was full of disbelief. "You actually—" His knees buckled, and he went down hard, sitting in the dust with the look of absolute shock on his face. Behind him, his men were moving, hands going to their guns, and Ethan knew this was it. This was where it went completely wrong. But before any of them could draw, Henry Henderson stepped out from behind a water trough with a rifle in his hands. "Don't," Henry said, and his voice carried authority he hadn't used in years. "First man who moves gets the next bullet." Tom Crawford appeared on a rooftop across the street, also armed. Then Garrett from the saloon stepping out onto his porch with a shotgun. Then more people. Citizens who'd been hiding, who'd been afraid, suddenly finding courage in numbers. Cole's men looked at each other, calculating odds, and then slowly raised their hands. Ethan kept his gun up, trained on Cole's men, but he could feel the pain in his shoulder now, sharp and insistent. Blood was running down his arm, dripping off his fingers. "You," he said to Reese, "get your boss to a doctor. Patch him up. Then all of you get on your horses and ride out. Don't come back." "You think this is over?" Reese spat. "I think you're outgunned and out of options," Ethan said flatly. "I think you've got about 10 seconds to decide whether you want to die here or ride away and live to be stupid somewhere else." Reese looked at the armed citizens, at Henry's rifle, at Ethan's unwavering gun. Then he bent down and helped Cole to his feet. Cole was breathing hard, one hand pressed to his side, blood seeping between his fingers. But his eyes were locked on Ethan, and there was something in them beyond shock, something like understanding. "Who are you?" Cole asked again, gasping through the pain. "Really?" Ethan lowered his gun slightly. "Someone who used to be like you, someone who thought being fast made him invincible. Someone who learned the hard way that there's always someone faster. That's not... You can't be..." Cole stopped, his face going even paler as the pieces fell into place. "Wade. You're Ethan Wade. You're supposed to be dead." "Was, for a while. Felt like it anyway." Cole laughed, and it turned into a cough that made him double over. "I called out Ethan Wade. I challenged a legend. I'm a fool." "No," Ethan said quietly. "You're young. There's a difference." Reese and another man supported Cole between them, starting to move toward the saloon where someone had run to get the town doctor. But Cole stopped, looking back at Ethan one more time. "Why didn't you kill me?" he asked. "You had the shot, center mass, could have ended it." "Because killing you wouldn't teach you anything," Ethan said. "Living with that wound will." "I don't understand." "You will. Eventually." They took Cole inside, and Henry kept his rifle trained on the remaining men until they'd all disappeared into the saloon. Then slowly, carefully, the armed citizens lowered their weapons. The street was silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping. It was Billy Patterson, emerging from wherever he'd been hiding. His face was streaked with tears, but he was clapping, and then others joined in. Not celebration exactly, more like relief, like they couldn't quite believe what they'd just witnessed. Ethan holstered his gun with a wince. His shoulder was on fire, and he could feel blood soaking through his shirt. The adrenaline was wearing off, and exhaustion was rushing in to take its place. "You're hit," Henry said, coming over. "Let me see." "I'm fine." You're bleeding all over Main Street. That's not fine. Martha Henderson appeared with clean cloth and water. Sit down before you fall down, you stubborn man. Ethan let them guide him to the saloon porch steps. Martha cut away his shirt around the wound while Henry kept watch, making sure none of Cole's men got any ideas. Went through clean, Martha announced after a moment. Missed the bone, you're lucky. Don't feel lucky. Trust me, you are. Another inch to the right and you'd be dead. She worked quickly, cleaning and bandaging while Ethan sat still and tried not to think about how close it had actually been. His draw had been rusty, slow. If Cole hadn't been surprised, hadn't hesitated for that split second after the door opened. But he had, and that split second had made all the difference. Mrs. Chen appeared with a glass of water. Drink? You look pale. I've been shot. Yes, and you'll live. Now drink. He drank because it was easier than arguing and the water tasted better than anything he could remember. Inside the saloon there was commotion, voices raised, the doctor working on Cole, the sound of someone crying out in pain. Think they'll leave? Tom Crawford asked, settling down beside Ethan with his bottle. They'll leave. Cole won't have much choice once he sees the whole town's armed now. He's not stupid, arrogant maybe, but not stupid. And if they come back, then we deal with it then. Ethan looked around at the people gathering, not a lot of them, maybe 30 or 40, but they were there, standing, not hiding anymore. But I don't think they will, not here, not after this. Billy pushed through the crowd and stopped in front of Ethan, his young face serious. You really are him, aren't you? Ethan Wade, the one from the stories. Stories are just stories, Billy. But you're fast. You beat Cole Brennan. I got lucky, Ethan interrupted. That's all. Right place, right time, and a draw that didn't get me killed. Don't make it more than it is. But you saved us. No, you all saved yourselves. I just gave you a reason to stand up. The boy didn't look convinced, but he nodded anyway. Then he surprised Ethan by reaching out and hugging him quickly before running off, embarrassed. Around 4 o'clock, Cole's men emerged from the saloon. They'd patched him up as best they could, and he was pale but standing, one arm wrapped around his ribs. They loaded him onto his horse, and the rest of them mounted up. Ethan watched from the porch, his shoulder throbbing but his gun within reach, just in case. Cole sat on his horse for a moment, looking down at the gathered townspeople. Then his eyes found Ethan. This isn't over, Cole said, but there was no heat in it, just statement of fact. Yes, it is, Ethan replied. You just don't know it yet. I'll heal. I'll get faster, and I'll come back. Maybe, but by then you'll have had time to think about what you're doing, about why. And maybe, you'll figure out that there's better ways to be strong than hurting people. Cole's jaw tightened. You don't know me. No, but I know who I was at your age, and if I could change, anyone can. They stared at each other for a long moment, and something passed between them. Not understanding? Not yet. But the possibility of it, the seed of it. Then Cole turned his horse and rode out, his men following. They didn't look back. The town watched them go until they were just dust on the horizon. Then, slowly, people started moving again. Talking, laughing, the tension breaking like a fever. Henry sat down beside Ethan with a heavy sigh. Well, that was something. That was stupid is what that was. Maybe, but it worked. This time. You think he'll be back? Ethan thought about it, watching the empty road. No, not here. He'll move on, find somewhere else, maybe keep doing what he's been doing, or maybe... He trailed off. Maybe what? Maybe what I said will stick. Maybe he'll think about it, and maybe one day he'll realize that being feared isn't the same as being respected. That's a lot of maybes. It is, but it's all any of us have. Martha finished with his bandage and stepped back. There. That should hold. But you need to rest. No more heroics for at least a week. Yes, ma'am. I mean it. That wound could get infected. You could still die from this. I'll be careful. She gave him a look that said she didn't believe him but wasn't going to argue. Then she went to check on others who'd been injured in various small ways during the confrontation. As the afternoon wore on, the town slowly returned to something like normal. Shops reopened. People came out of their homes. Children played in the street where hours before two men had tried to kill each other. Ethan stayed on the porch, too tired to move, watching it all with something that might have been contentment, or might have just been exhaustion. Tom came back with his bottle, now half empty. Want to know what I think? Not particularly. I think you didn't come here by accident. I think some part of you knew this was going to happen. That doesn't make sense, doesn't it? Man like you, with your history, wandering into a dying town right before a gunslinger shows up? That's not coincidence, that's fate. I don't believe in fate. Then call it instinct. Call it whatever you want. But I think you came here because you needed to remember who you were. And that town needed you to remember too. Ethan didn't answer. Couldn't. Because maybe Tom was right. Maybe he had known, on some level deeper than thought, that this was where he needed to be. Or maybe it really was just coincidence. Either way, it didn't matter now. The sun was setting when Mrs. Chen came to collect him. Come on, enough sitting around. You need a proper bed and proper rest. In a minute. Now. Before you pass out and I have to drag you. He let her help him up, biting back a groan as his shoulder protested. They walked slowly back to the boarding house, and he felt every one of his years in every step. But he'd lived, and Cole had lived, and the town had found its spine again. That was enough. It had to be. Because tomorrow there would be other problems, other threats, other battles to fight. But tonight, for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan Wade slept without ghosts chasing him through the dark. The fever came on the third night. Ethan woke shivering despite the summer heat, his shoulder burning like someone had pressed hot iron against the bone. The bandages were soaked through, and when he tried to sit up, the room tilted sideways. "Mrs. Chen," he called out, but his voice came out weak and thin. She must have been listening because she was there within seconds, lamp in hand, her face creasing with worry when she saw him. "Infection," she said, peeling back the bandage. The wound had gone angry and red, weeping fluid that wasn't quite blood. "Should have known. Bullet probably wasn't clean. I'll be fine. You'll be dead if we don't get this treated." She disappeared and came back with Henry Henderson, who took one look and swore. "Doc Patterson's over at the Callaway place delivering a baby," Henry said. "Won't be back until morning." "Then we do it ourselves," Mrs. Chen said. She was already heating water, gathering clean cloth. "Henry, hold him down. This is going to hurt." It did. More than the gunshot had. Mrs. Chen cleaned the wound with something that felt like liquid fire, and Ethan bit down on a leather strap to keep from crying out. His vision went white around the edges, and he could hear his own breathing, ragged and desperate. "There was," Mrs. Chen said finally. "That's the best I can do. If the fever breaks by morning, he'll live. If it doesn't—" She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Henry stayed through the night, sitting in the chair beside the bed while Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes he knew where he was. Other times he was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere dark and loud where guns were always firing and bodies were always falling. "Easy," Henry's voice would say, pulling him back. "You're safe. You're in Redemption Valley." "Not safe," Ethan mumbled through cracked lips. "Never safe. Safe enough for now." The fever broke around dawn, leaving Ethan weak and wrung out but clear-headed. His shoulder still hurt, but it was a cleaner pain now, the kind that meant healing instead of dying. Mrs. Chen brought him broth and wouldn't let him get up until he'd finished it all. "You're staying in bed today," she announced. "No arguments. You need to rest. The town survived this long without you. It'll survive another day." But she was wrong about that, as it turned out. Around noon, Billy Patterson came tearing up the stairs. He burst into the room without knocking, his face flushed and frightened. "Mr. Wade, you gotta come. There's a man, he says he's from the Territorial Marshal's office. He's asking questions about what happened, about the shooting." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "About you, about Cole, about who shot who and why." Billy's voice dropped to a whisper. "Mr. Henderson told him it was self-defense, but the man, he don't look convinced." "Help me up," Ethan said to Mrs. Chen. "You're not going anywhere. Help me up or I'll do it myself and make it worse." She muttered something in Chinese that probably wasn't flattering, but she helped him into a clean shirt and got him downstairs. Each step was agony, but he'd felt worse, had fought through worse. The man waiting in the boarding house parlor was maybe 40, with the kind of face that never smiled and eyes that cataloged everything. He wore a badge pinned to his vest and a gun that looked well used. "Ethan Wade," the man said, and it wasn't a question. "I'm Deputy Marshal Frank Rawlings. We need to talk." "About what?" "About a gunfight that left one man wounded and nearly sparked a war in the middle of a town that's supposed to be under territorial protection." Rawlings settled back in his chair. "About whether that was self-defense or murder." "It was self-defense," Henry said from the doorway. "Cole drew first. We all saw it." "That's what I'm hearing. But I'm also hearing that Mr. Wade here challenged Cole Brennan to a duel. That sounds less like self-defense and more like mutual combat, which is still illegal, in case anyone's forgotten." Ethan sat down carefully, keeping his face neutral. "Cole and his men were terrorizing the town, stealing, threatening people. I tried to get them to leave peacefully. They refused." "So you challenged the leader to a gunfight." "I gave him an option that didn't involve more innocent people getting hurt. An option that ended with him shot and bleeding." Rawlings pulled out a notebook. "You know what's interesting? I've been asking around about you. Nobody knows anything. No history, no background, nothing. It's like you appeared out of thin air 3 days before the shooting." "I'm a drifter. That's what drifters do. Drift. Except you're not just any drifter, are you?" Rawlings leaned forward. "Because I sent a telegram to the main office describing you. And you know what came back? A very interesting message telling me to be extremely careful and to ask you directly about something that happened in Silver Creek 15 years ago." The room went cold. Ethan felt everyone's eyes on him, but he kept his gaze locked on Rawlings. "Don't know what you're talking about." "No?" "Because the message said that Ethan Wade, the real Ethan Wade, was involved in an incident that left 4 men dead. Men who'd been hired to kill a judge's family. Wade killed all 4 before they could finish the job. Saved the judge, his wife, and their 2 children." "Sounds like he did the right thing," Henry said. "He did, which is why the judge made sure all charges were dropped. Why Wade was allowed to walk away clean." Rawlings' eyes never left Ethan. "But the message also said Wade disappeared after that. Retired. Vanished. And that if I ever encountered someone claiming to be him, I should remember that the real Ethan Wade was the kind of man who valued life more than reputation." "What's your point?" Ethan asked. "My point is that I've got a situation here. Cole Brennan is a known troublemaker, but he's also connected. His uncle sits on the territorial council. There's going to be pressure to make an example of whoever shot him." Rawlings paused. "Unless I can make a very compelling case that it was justified. That the person who did it wasn't some trigger-happy gunslinger looking for glory, but someone who had no other choice." "It was justified," Martha Henderson said from the doorway. She'd been listening, and now she stepped forward. "My husband already told you what happened. Cole and his men were terrorizing this town, taking what they wanted, hurting people. Mr. Wade tried to resolve it peacefully. He gave Cole every opportunity to leave. Cole chose to fight. And the challenge, the formal duel, was the only way to keep more people from getting killed," Ethan said quietly. "If I'd just shot Cole in the street without warning, his men would have opened fire. People would have died. Innocent people. So I gave him what he wanted, a fair fight, one-on-one, and I made sure everyone knew the terms." Rawlings studied him for a long moment. Then he closed his notebook. "Here's what I'm going to put in my report. I'm going to say that Cole Brennan and his associates were engaged in criminal activity, that they threatened and assaulted multiple citizens, that you, acting in defense of yourself and others, were forced to engage in armed confrontation when all other options were exhausted." He stood up. "I'm also going to recommend that no charges be filed, given the circumstances and the testimony of multiple witnesses." "Just like that?" Henry asked suspiciously. "Just like that. Because the truth is, gentlemen, the territory doesn't have the resources to protect every small town from every group of bandits. If you're willing to protect yourselves, that makes my job easier." Rawlings looked at Ethan. "But I'm also going to include a note about who you really are. Because if Cole's uncle tries to push back, it'll help to know that the man who shot his nephew isn't some nobody. That he's someone with a history of doing the right thing, even when it's hard." "I'd rather you didn't," Ethan said. "Too bad. You don't get to hide anymore, not after this." After Rawlings left, the room erupted in questions. Who was the judge? What happened in Silver Creek? Was the story true? Ethan waved them off. "It's ancient history. Doesn't matter. It matters if it keeps you out of jail, Tom Crawford said. He'd been sitting in the corner so quietly, Ethan had almost forgotten he was there. Or worse. What's worse than jail? Billy asked. Cole's uncle deciding to send someone better than Cole to finish what he started. The thought hung in the air like smoke. They'd won this round, but the fight might not be over. Not really. Over the next week, Ethan healed slowly. The infection was gone, but the wound left his shoulder stiff and his arm weak. He spent his days on Mrs. Chen's porch, watching the town return to life. And it was returning. The difference was visible. Calloway reopened his store. The saloon had customers again. People walked the streets without constantly looking over their shoulders. But more than that, something had changed in them. They stood straighter, talked louder. They'd remembered how to be brave, and once you remembered that, it was hard to forget. Henry Henderson had taken to wearing his old badge again. It wasn't official, the town still couldn't pay him, but people deferred to him anyway. Asked his opinion, brought him their disputes. Feels right, Henry admitted one afternoon, sitting beside Ethan on the porch. Wearing this again. Like I'm finally doing what I was supposed to be doing all along. Just don't get shot doing it, Ethan said. I'll try, though that's rich coming from you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Billy Patterson help old Dutch Carmichael repair his fence. The boy had grown in the past week, not physically, but in the way he carried himself, like he'd learned something important about how the world worked. You planning to stay? Henry asked eventually. Ethan had been asking himself the same question. Don't know. Wasn't planning to stay when I got here. And now? Now I'm thinking about it. Town could use someone like you, someone who knows how to handle trouble when it shows up. I'm too old to be anyone's solution. Maybe, but you're the only solution we've got. Before Ethan could respond, a rider appeared on the eastern road. Just one, moving at a steady pace. Not hurrying, but not dawdling either. Henry stood up, his hand moving instinctively toward his gun. You expecting anyone? No. They watched the rider approach, and as he got closer, Ethan felt his stomach tighten. There was something familiar about the way the man sat his horse. Something in the set of his shoulders. The rider stopped in front of the boarding house and dismounted. He was young, maybe 25, with dark hair and darker eyes. His clothes were dusty from travel, and he wore his gun like someone who knew how to use it. I'm looking for Ethan Wade, he said. Who's asking? Henry's hand was on his gun now. My name's Daniel Brennan. The young man's eyes found Ethan. Cole's younger brother. The street went quiet. People who'd been going about their business stopped and stared. You come here for revenge? Henry asked. No, sir. I came here to talk. We've had enough talking, someone muttered from a nearby doorway. But Daniel raised his hands, showing they were empty. I'm not here to fight. I'm here because... He paused, struggling with the words. Because I need to understand what happened to my brother. Ethan stood up slowly, ignoring the protest from his shoulder. You come alone? Yes, sir. And Cole? How is he? Alive, healing, but different. Daniel's voice was careful. He won't talk about what happened here, won't explain, just keeps staring at nothing and touching the scar on his side. He's thinking, Ethan said. That's good. Is it? Because the brother I knew didn't think. He just acted. He was mean and fast, and he didn't care about anything except proving he was the best. Daniel's hands dropped. But now he's quiet, almost gentle, and I don't understand why. Ethan stepped off the porch, moving carefully. You want to know what happened? I'll tell you. Your brother came here looking to take over a town that couldn't fight back. He thought being fast and mean made him strong. I showed him different. By nearly killing him. By not killing him, Ethan corrected. I had the shot, center mass. Could have ended it, but I didn't. Why not? Because killing him would have just made him another body. Letting him live gave him a chance to learn something. Daniel stared at him, trying to process that. Learn what? That being fast isn't the same as being strong. That hurting people doesn't make you powerful. That the real test isn't how quick you can draw, it's what you choose to do once you've drawn. That's... Daniel trailed off. That's what Cole keeps saying, almost word for word. Then he learned the lesson. But I don't understand what it means. He was the best. Everyone said so. Fastest gun in 3 territories. And you beat him. I didn't beat him, Ethan said quietly. I just showed him there was more to life than winning gunfights. Daniel looked frustrated, like he was trying to grasp something just out of reach. Finally, he asked, "What am I supposed to do?" "My brother's changed. He won't ride with the old crew anymore. Won't take jobs. Just sits and thinks and talks about second chances." "What do you want to do?" "I want—" Daniel stopped, surprised by the question. "I want to understand. I want to know how someone can be so sure of who they are one day and completely different the next." "It's not that complicated," Ethan said. "Your brother thought he was invincible. Then he met someone who showed him he wasn't. That kind of wake-up call changes a man, forces him to look at himself and decide if he likes what he sees. And what if he doesn't like it? Then he changes, or at least he tries." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then he looked at Ethan with something like desperation. "Can you teach me? Whatever you taught Cole." "I didn't teach your brother anything. He learned on his own." "But you started it. You showed him something he needed to see." Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "I've been following Cole my whole life, trying to be like him. But if he's changing, if he's becoming something different, then maybe I should too. Before I make the same mistakes he did." Ethan studied the young man, 25 years old and already tired, already questioning. That was rare. Most men his age thought they knew everything. "You know how to shoot?" Ethan asked. "Yes, sir." "Fast?" "Fast enough." "That's the problem. Being fast enough gets you killed just as surely as being slow." Ethan gestured to a post about 20 feet away. "Draw on that post. Let me see what you've got." Daniel looked uncertain, but moved into position. His hand hovered near his gun, and then he drew. He was fast. Not Cole fast, but fast enough to be dangerous. The movement was smooth, practiced, confident. "Again," Ethan said. "But this time, before you draw, tell me why you're drawing." "What?" "Why are you pulling that gun? What's the threat? What are you protecting? What's your purpose?" Daniel frowned. It's just a draw." "Nothing's just a draw. Every time you pull a gun, you're making a choice. The question is whether you know what you're choosing." Daniel tried again, and this time he hesitated. The draw was slower, less sure. "You're thinking too much," Henry called out helpfully. "No," Ethan said. "He's thinking for the first time. That's different." Over the next hour, Ethan worked with Daniel, breaking down everything he thought he knew about gunfighting. Not how to draw faster, but how to think clearer. Not how to shoot quicker, but how to decide whether shooting was even necessary. "A gun's just a tool," Ethan explained, "like a hammer. You don't pull out a hammer every time you've got a problem. Sometimes you need different tools. Sometimes you need no tools at all. But if you're in a fight, then you've already failed. Real strength is avoiding the fight in the first place." "That sounds like cowardice." "Does it? Because I stood in this street and faced your brother when I didn't have to. I could have left, could have hidden, but I stood because someone needed to. That's not cowardice, that's choosing your battles." Daniel absorbed this, his young face serious. "My whole life, people have told me that being tough means never backing down, that real men fight when challenged. Real men know when a fight matters and when it's just ego," Ethan said. "Your brother learned that the hard way. You've got a chance to learn it easier." By the time the sun started setting, Daniel looked exhausted but different, like something heavy had been lifted off his shoulders. "I should go," he said. "Cole will want to know what I found here." "What did you find?" Ethan asked. "Understanding, maybe. Or the beginning of it." Daniel mounted his horse. "Thank you for not killing my brother, for giving him a second chance." "Everyone deserves a second chance," Ethan said. "What they do with it is up to them." After Daniel rode away, Henry shook his head. "You just spent all afternoon teaching Cole Brennan's brother how to think. If someone had told me that's how this week would go, I'd have called them crazy." "Maybe we're all crazy," Ethan said. "Maybe, but it's working." The days that followed settled into a routine. Ethan's shoulder healed enough that he could use it without wanting to scream. The town continued its slow resurrection, and people started coming to him with questions, not about gunfighting, about everything else. Disputes between neighbors, problems with livestock, a teenager who'd stolen from the general store and didn't know how to make it right. I'm not a lawman, Ethan told Henry after the fourth person sought him out in one day. No, but you're someone people trust. That's rarer. I don't want this. Didn't come here to be anyone's anything. And yet here you are. Henry smiled. Funny how life works. 3 weeks after the shooting, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Ethan Wade, care of Redemption Valley, and the handwriting was careful and unpracticed. Ethan opened it on Mrs. Chen's porch while she brought him coffee. The letter was from Cole Brennan. It was short, blunt, no apologies, no excuses, just a few lines saying that he'd been thinking about what Ethan had said, about second chances and choices and what strength really meant. The last line read, "You could have killed me. You didn't. I'm still figuring out what to do with that, but I wanted you to know I'm trying." Ethan folded the letter and put it in his pocket. Good news? Mrs. Chen asked. Maybe. Too soon to tell. You know what I think? What? I think you came here to die, to find one last fight that you wouldn't walk away from, but instead you found something to live for. Ethan didn't answer. Couldn't. Because she might be right. He'd spent so long running from who he'd been, trying to become no one, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to matter, to have a purpose beyond simple survival. And now, sitting on this porch in this dying town that was learning to breathe again, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt useful. The sun set slowly, painting the street in shades of gold and red. Billy Patterson ran past, chasing a dog. Henry and Martha walked by, arm in arm, talking quietly. Tom Crawford emerged from the saloon, sober for once, and waved. A dying town. That's what Redemption Valley had been. But dying wasn't the same as dead. And sometimes all it took was one person refusing to give up to remind everyone else that they didn't have to either. Ethan sipped his coffee and watched the day end, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't planning his next move, wasn't thinking about where to go when this place finally collapsed. Because maybe it wouldn't collapse. Maybe it would survive. And maybe, just maybe, so would he. 4 months passed like water through cupped hands. Present one moment, memory the next. Ethan's shoulder healed, leaving a puckered scar that ached when rain was coming. He'd taken a room permanently at Mrs. Chen's place, paying week by week, never quite admitting he was staying but never leaving either. The Colt sat in his drawer most days, only coming out when Henry asked him to patrol the edges of town or when someone reported trouble that needed a steady hand. Redemption Valley was changing. Slowly, grudgingly, but changing nonetheless. The general store had regular customers now. A family from the east had bought the old mill and was talking about starting it up again. The saloon still served whiskey, but Garrett had added actual food to the menu, real meals, not just jerky and stale bread. Even the church, which had been empty for 2 years, saw someone sweep it out and prop the doors open. It wasn't prosperity, not yet, but it was possibility, and that was something. Ethan spent his mornings helping where he could, fixing fences with Billy, who'd appointed himself Ethan's unofficial apprentice, mediating disputes between neighbors who'd forgotten how to talk to each other without shouting, teaching Daniel's principles to anyone who'd listen. That strength wasn't about domination, it was about restraint. You're becoming respectable, Tom Crawford observed one afternoon, considerably more sober than he used to be. It's disturbing. Wasn't trying to. Never are. That's what makes it stick. But not everything was peaceful. 3 weeks after Daniel's visit, a group of men rode through, hard-looking types who worked for the mining company that had abandoned the valley. They'd heard the town was stirring back to life and wanted to make sure everyone understood the mine still belonged to the company, and if it ever reopened, it would be on their terms. Henry had stood his ground, badge glinting in the sun, and told them politely but firmly that Redemption Valley wasn't interested in being owned by anyone. The men had looked at Ethan, standing behind Henry with his hand resting casual-like near where his gun would be if he was wearing it. They'd left without another word. "You didn't even have your gun," Henry said afterward. "Didn't need it. They knew who I was." "Does that bother you, being known again?" Ethan had thought about it. "Used to. Now I'm thinking maybe there's worse things than having a reputation, long as you earned it honest." The real surprise came on a Tuesday morning in late October when 2 riders appeared on the Eastern Road. One was Daniel Brennan, looking older somehow, more settled. The other was Cole. The town went still when they recognized him. People stepped back from windows. Doors locked. Henry's hand went to his gun. But Ethan, sitting on Mrs. Chen's porch, just waited. Cole dismounted slowly, favoring his right side where the scar still pulled. He looked different, thinner, quieter. His gun was gone, just an empty holster on his hip. "Mr. Wade," Cole said, stopping at the base of the porch steps. His voice was respectful, almost tentative. "I was hoping we could talk." "We're talking." "In private, maybe?" Ethan considered him. The arrogance was gone. So was the mean edge that had made everyone afraid. What remained was a young man who looked lost and was trying to find his way. "All right," Ethan said, "but Henry stays close, no offense." "None taken. I'd do the same." They walked to the edge of town where the old cemetery sat quiet and overgrown. Daniel stayed behind with Henry, giving them space. Cole moved carefully, like his body was still remembering how to work. "I've been thinking," Cole started, then stopped. Started again. "Ever since that day, about what you said, about choices and consequences and what strength really means. And I don't think I understood it then. Don't know if I understand it now fully, but I'm trying." Cole touched his side where the wound had been. "This reminds me every day. Every time I move wrong, every time it pulls, it reminds me that I was given something most men don't get." "What's that?" "A second chance." They stood in silence for a moment, looking at headstones that marked lives ended too soon. Most of the names were worn away, forgotten by time and weather. "You know what scared me most?" Cole said suddenly. "It wasn't the bullet. Wasn't the pain or the blood or thinking I might die. It was the moment right before, when I realized you were faster than me. That everything I'd built my life on, everything I thought made me special, it was just nothing. A lie I'd been telling myself." "It wasn't nothing," Ethan said. "You're fast. Probably faster than most men you'll ever meet. But fast doesn't mean anything if you're using it for the wrong reasons." "That's what I'm trying to figure out. The right reasons." Cole kicked at a tuft of grass. "I've hurt people. Killed some. All because I was young and stupid and thought it made me powerful. How do I make that right?" "You can't, not completely. Dead is dead and hurt is hurt. You can't undo it." Cole's face fell, and for a moment he looked impossibly young. "Then what's the point? Why try?" "Because going forward you can choose different. You can be different. And maybe that prevents someone else from making the same mistakes you did." "That's what Daniel said you'd say." "Smart kid, your brother. Smarter than me, anyway." Cole managed a small smile. "He wants to stay here, in Redemption Valley. Says he feels like he can think here, without everyone expecting him to be someone he's not." Ethan looked at him sharply. "And you?" "I'm thinking about it too. If you'll have us. If the town will have us." Cole met his eyes. "I know what I did here, know what I put people through, and I know sorry doesn't fix it, but I want to try. Want to prove that people can change if they're given the chance." "This isn't about what I think," Ethan said. "It's about what they think." He gestured toward the town. "Those people you terrorized. They're the ones who have to live with you if you stay." "I know. That's why I need to ask them, face to face. No hiding, no excuses. Just honesty." They walked back to town slowly. Word had spread, and a crowd had gathered in the street. Not hostile exactly, but wary. These were people with long memories and fresh scars. Henry stood at the front, hand still near his gun. "Say what you came to say, Brennan." Cole stopped in the middle of the street, the same spot where he'd faced Ethan 4 months ago. But this time his hands were empty, his head unbowed, his eyes clear. "I came to apologize," he said, and his voice carried in the quiet. "For what I did here. For the fear and the hurt and the damage. I came here thinking I was strong, thinking I could take whatever I wanted because I was fast with a gun. I was wrong." "Little late for apologies," someone muttered. "I know. And I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, doesn't give back what I took or undo what I did." Cole's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "But I'm asking anyway. Not for forgiveness. I don't deserve that. Just for a chance to prove I'm not that person anymore." "Why should we believe you?" Martha Henderson asked, stepping forward. Her face was hard. You rode in here 4 months ago with all the same words, talked about protection and order, then you started stealing and hurting people. You're right. And if I'd died that day, maybe that's all I would have ever been, another bully with a fast draw and a mean streak. Cole touched his side again. But Mr. Wade chose different. He could have killed me, should have killed me. Instead, he gave me something harder. He made me live with what I'd done, made me think about it every day. And that's supposed to make us trust you? James Calloway's voice was bitter. He still had bruises that were only now fading. No. Nothing I say will make you trust me. Trust has to be earned, and I haven't earned it yet. Maybe never will, but I'm asking for the chance to try. Cole looked around at all of them. My brother Daniel wants to stay here. He says this place has something other towns don't, hope. And I want to be part of that. Want to help build something instead of tearing it down. Pretty words, Tom Crawford said, but words are cheap. They are, Cole agreed. So I'm offering actions instead. You need work done? I'll do it. You need someone to help rebuild what I helped tear down? I'm here. You need someone to ride out and deal with trouble so you don't have to? I can do that too. No pay. No glory. Just work. Until you decide whether I've earned the right to stay. The crowd murmured among themselves. Some faces were hard, unwilling to bend. Others looked thoughtful, considering. Billy Patterson pushed through to the front. Mr. Wade gave you a second chance. Maybe we should too. You're a child, someone said. You don't understand. I understand plenty, Billy shot back. I understand Mr. Wade could have killed him and didn't. I understand that's what mercy looks like. And if Mr. Wade thinks people can change, then maybe they can. All eyes turned to Ethan. He felt the weight of their expectation, their hope that he'd have an answer that made everything simple. But there were no simple answers. I can't tell you what to do, Ethan said finally. Can't tell you to forgive or forget or trust. That's your choice, same as everything else. But I will say this. I've seen men who couldn't change, who were mean and hard all the way to the grave. And I've seen men who did change, who looked at themselves and decided to be better. And which is he? Calloway asked, pointing at Cole. Don't know yet. Neither does he, probably. But he's asking for the chance to find out. And in my experience, the men who can't change don't ask. They just keep taking until someone stops them. Ethan paused. Cole asked, That's something. Henry was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice carrying the authority of his badge, even if the town couldn't pay him to wear it. Here's what we're going to do. Cole Brennan, you and your brother can stay, for now. But you work. You help. You prove every single day that you're not who you were. And if you slip, if you hurt someone, if you steal something, if you so much as look at someone wrong, you're gone. Not negotiable. Not debatable. Gone. Understood, Cole said quietly. And one more thing. You wear your gun again, you leave. We've got enough people here who know how to handle trouble. We don't need another gunfighter. We need citizens. Cole unbuckled his gun belt, the empty holster sliding free. He held it for a moment, and Ethan could see what it cost him. That belt, that gun, they'd been his identity for so long. Giving them up was like cutting off a limb. But he did it. Handed the belt to Daniel, who took it silently. All right then, Henry said. Let's see if a man can change. The crowd dispersed slowly, people returning to their lives but watching, always watching. Cole would be under scrutiny every moment of every day, and they all knew it. Thank you, Cole said to Ethan as the street emptied. Don't thank me. Thank them. They're the ones taking the risk. I will. Every day. Cole hesitated. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. That day in the street, when you drew. You moved before I did. I've been trying to figure out how. I was watching you, waiting for the tell, and then suddenly your gun was up and I didn't even see. You were watching my hand, Ethan said. That was your mistake. Where should I have been watching? My eyes. Your hand pulls the trigger, but your eyes make the choice. By the time your hand moves, the decision's already made. I saw you decide to draw a half second before you did it. That's all the edge I needed. Cole absorbed this. So it's not about speed. Speed helps, but it's about reading your opponent, understanding them before they understand themselves. Ethan started walking toward Mrs. Chen's. But you won't need that anymore. You're done fighting. Am I? You better be, because next time you draw on someone, you might not get shot in the side. Might be center mass, might be the head. And then all this trying and changing and growing, it ends, just like that. Cole nodded slowly. I'll remember that. The weeks that followed were tense but productive. Cole and Daniel worked from dawn to dusk, helping repair buildings, clearing debris, doing whatever needed doing. Cole kept his head down, spoke quietly, never raised his voice or his fist. When people insulted him, and they did, regularly, he took it without complaint. Kids learning, Tom observed one afternoon, watching Cole help old Dutch Carmichael replace rotten boards on his porch. Learning that hard work heals better than apologies. He's trying, Ethan agreed. Whether he succeeds is up to him. But slowly, grudgingly, the town began to soften. Not everyone, and not all at once, but in small ways. Calloway nodded at Cole when he walked past. Martha stopped glaring. Even Henry started assigning him real tasks instead of just grunt work. You see that? Billy said excitedly one morning. Mrs. Patterson brought Mr. Brennan water while he was working, actually smiled at him. Progress, Ethan said. Do you think he'll make it? Really make it? I think he's got a chance. Better chance than most men get. December came cold and hard. The first snow fell on a Tuesday, dusting everything white and clean. Ethan stood on Mrs. Chen's porch, watching the flakes drift down, and felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the absence of war. Henry appeared, stamping snow off his boots. Got something to show you. They walked to the town square where a group had gathered. In the center, Cole and Daniel were raising a new sign. Hand-carved, simple but sturdy. It read, Redemption Valley, a town that remembers. Cole made it, Henry explained. Took him 3 weeks. Keeps saying he wanted to get the words right. What's it mean? A town that remembers? I asked him that. He said it means we remember where we came from. Remember what we survived. Remember that change is possible if you're willing to work for it. Henry smiled slightly. Kid's getting poetic in his old age. The sign went up to scattered applause. Not everyone clapped, but enough did. Cole stepped back, looking at his work, and for the first time since Ethan had met him, the young man looked genuinely happy. That night, Mrs. Chen made a feast, or what passed for one in Redemption Valley. Everyone gathered at the saloon, crowding around tables, sharing food and stories and the warmth of human connection. Ethan sat in the corner, watching it all. Billy was teaching Daniel some card game, both of them laughing at nothing. Martha and Henry were dancing, badly, to music from a fiddle that Tom Crawford had miraculously produced. Calloway was talking to Cole, actually talking, and while their conversation looked serious, it wasn't hostile. You did this, Mrs. Chen said, appearing beside him with 2 glasses of whiskey. She handed him one. I didn't do anything. They did it themselves. You gave them a reason to try. That's more than most people get. They drank in comfortable silence, and Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like he belonged somewhere, like he'd found a place that needed him and that he needed in return. You planning to stay? Mrs. Chen asked, echoing Henry's question from months ago. Yeah, Ethan said, surprising himself. Yeah, I think I am. Good. About time you stopped running. Spring came eventually, the way it always does. The snow melted, the mud dried, and green things started pushing up through the earth. The town continued its slow recovery, and with it came new people, families looking for a fresh start, workers looking for opportunities, merchants looking for customers. Redemption Valley was growing again. One morning in March, a writer arrived with a letter. It was addressed to Ethan Wade, official-looking, with the territorial seal on the envelope. Inside was a commission. The territorial governor, having heard about the situation in Redemption Valley and the resolution thereof, was officially appointing Ethan as deputy marshal for the region. It came with a badge, a small salary, and the authority to keep the peace across 3 counties. You gonna take it? Henry asked when Ethan showed him. Don't know. Wasn't looking to be official. But you've been doing the job anyway. Might as well get paid for it. Ethan thought about it. About what it would mean to wear a badge again after all these years. To be official, accountable, visible. Yeah, he said finally. Yeah, I'll take it. The badge was simple metal, worn from previous owners, but it felt right when he pinned it to his chest. Not heavy, just present, a reminder of responsibility. Cole was the first to see it. His eyes widened slightly. Then he smiled, a genuine smile, not the predatory thing from before. "Deputy Marshal Wade," Cole said, "has a ring to it. Don't get comfortable. First thing I'm doing is making sure you and Daniel stay on the straight path." "We will. I promise." Cole's hand went to his side, the habitual gesture. "You know, I've been thinking about that day, about what you said about mercy being stronger than killing. And I think I finally understand. Killing me would have been easy, would have solved the problem quick. But letting me live, making me face what I'd done, giving me a chance to be better, that was harder. Took more courage, more faith." "Faith in what?" "In people. In the idea that we're not just one thing, that we can grow and change and become something better than we were." Ethan nodded slowly. That was it exactly, though he'd never put it into words himself. The choice to show mercy wasn't weakness. It was strength, the hardest kind of strength there was. Summer arrived hot and bright. Billy turned 13 and started working at the general store, saving money for something he wouldn't tell anyone about. Daniel proposed to a girl who'd moved to town in May, a quiet thing with brown eyes and a quick laugh. Cole had begun teaching defensive techniques to anyone who wanted to learn, not fighting, but protection. How to read danger, how to avoid it, how to diffuse it with words instead of weapons. "He's good at it," Henry observed one afternoon, watching Cole work with a group of teenagers. "Patient, clear. Nothing like the kid who rode in here a year ago." "People change," Ethan said, "when they're given the chance." They stood together in comfortable silence, two men who'd found purpose in protecting something worth protecting. "You ever regret it?" Henry asked eventually. "Not killing him when you had the chance?" Ethan thought about it honestly. "No. Because if I'd killed him, that's all he would have been. Another body. Another name in a long list of men I put down. But I let him live, and now he's something more. Something better. That's worth more than any quick solution. Even if he'd gone back to his old ways? Even then, at least I gave him the choice. What he did with it would have been on him, not me. The years that followed were good ones. Not perfect. Nothing ever was. There were droughts that tested them, winters that hurt, disputes that required mediation. But the town survived. More than survived. It thrived in its small way. Ethan served as deputy marshal for 7 years before age and old wounds made him retire. The badge went to Daniel Brennan, who'd proven himself steady and fair. Cole worked as his deputy, using his knowledge of how criminals thought to prevent crime rather than commit it. Billy Patterson grew up to run the general store, married a girl from the next town over, and named his first son Ethan. He'd tell the boys stories about the stranger who'd walked into Redemption Valley and shown everyone that courage wasn't about fighting. It was about choosing not to when you could. Tom Crawford got sober and stayed that way, working as the town clerk and keeping records that documented every small victory and setback. Henry Henderson wore his badge until the day he died at 73. Martha beside him, proud and grieving in equal measure. Mrs. Chen ran her boarding house until she was 92, outliving everyone's expectations, including her own. The morning she died, she was found sitting in her rocking chair on the porch, looking out at the town she'd helped build, a slight smile on her face. And Ethan Wade lived quietly, helping where he could, teaching what he knew, becoming the kind of elder statesman that every town needs. Someone who'd seen enough to understand what mattered and what didn't. On his 75th birthday, the town threw him a party. He protested, of course, but they did it anyway. Everyone came. The new families and the old ones. The children who'd grown up hearing stories about him, and the adults who remembered the truth. Cole Brennan, now in his 50s with gray in his hair and laugh lines around his eyes, stood up to make a toast. 25 years ago, Cole said, his voice carrying over the gathered crowd, I rode into this town thinking I was the toughest, fastest, meanest thing around. Thought being strong meant making people afraid. Thought power came from a gun and a willingness to use it. He paused, his hand going to his side where the scar still pulled. Then I met a man who showed me different, who proved that real strength isn't about domination, it's about restraint. That real power isn't making people fear you, it's earning their respect. And that the hardest thing anyone can do isn't pulling a trigger, It's choosing not to when every part of you wants to. Cole raised his glass. To Ethan Wade, the man who saved my life by not taking it. The man who showed us all what it means to be truly strong. And the man who proved that mercy isn't weakness, it's the bravest thing there is. Everyone drank, and Ethan felt his eyes burn in a way that had nothing to do with the whiskey. Later, when the party was winding down and people were heading home, Billy found him sitting on the porch of his small house at the edge of town. "You okay, Mr. Wade?" "Yeah, kid. Just thinking." "About what?" "About how I came here planning to disappear. Thought this would be the place where Ethan Wade finally died and I could just be nothing. Nobody. But it didn't work out that way. No. Instead, I found something better. Found out that being nobody isn't the same as having peace. That running from yourself just means you're always looking over your shoulder." Ethan smiled. "Found out that the only way to really live is to stop hiding and start helping." Billy sat down beside him. He was 38 now, with children of his own and responsibilities he took seriously. But in moments like this, he was still that 12-year-old kid who'd seen something in a stranger that no one else had. "Thank you," Billy said quietly, "for staying, for teaching us, for showing us that change is possible." "I didn't do anything special, Billy. Just made a choice. Same choice everyone has to make eventually, whether to be defined by your worst moments or your best ones. That's what I'm teaching my kids. That's what Cole taught his students. That's what this whole town believes now." Billy looked out at Redemption Valley, lit by lamplight and moonlight, and the gentle glow of homes filled with people who'd chosen to stay. "We believe that people can change, that mercy matters, that strength comes from restraint, all because you showed us." Ethan didn't respond. Couldn't. Because the truth was simpler and more complicated than any of them knew. He hadn't come to Redemption Valley to be a hero. He'd come to die quietly, worn out by years of violence and running. He'd come to a dying town because he was a dying man, and it seemed fitting. But something had happened instead. The town had refused to die, and in refusing, it had reminded him that he didn't have to either, that the greatest transformation wasn't in Cole Brennan learning restraint, or Daniel finding purpose, or the town recovering its hope. The greatest transformation was in Ethan Wade finally forgiving himself for the man he'd been, and accepting the man he'd become. A man who'd learned that the fastest draw didn't matter as much as the wisest choice. A man who'd discovered that preventing violence took more courage than committing it. A man who'd proven that true power wasn't domination. It was knowing when to fight and when to show mercy. As the years continued to pass, Redemption Valley became known throughout the territory. Not for its silver or its commerce or its size, but for something rarer, for being the place where second chances were real, where people could start over, where redemption was more than just a word painted on a sign. People came from all over, some running from their past, some looking for a future, some just tired of being afraid. And they found a town that had learned the hardest lesson there was, that we're all broken in some way, we've all made mistakes, and we all deserve the chance to be better than we were. Ethan Wade died quietly on a Tuesday morning in October, 78 years old, sitting on his porch, watching the sun rise over the town he'd accidentally saved. They found him with a slight smile on his face, at peace in a way he'd never been in life. The funeral was the largest the town had ever seen. People came from 3 territories to pay their respects. Cole Brennan delivered the eulogy, his voice steady even though tears ran down his weathered face. "He gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve it," Cole said. "And in doing so, he taught me that mercy isn't about what someone deserves. It's about what kind of person you want to be. He chose to be the kind of person who believed in redemption. And because he believed it, the rest of us learned to believe it too." They buried him in the cemetery overlooking the town, and on his headstone they carved the words he'd lived by even when he didn't realize it. Ethan Wade, he chose mercy. In the years that followed, Redemption Valley continued to grow. New generations were born who never knew the old gunfighter personally, but grew up with his stories. They learned about the day he faced down Cole Brennan and chose not to kill him. They learned about the choice that changed everything. And they learned the lesson that Ethan Wade had spent his entire life learning himself, that the strongest people aren't the ones who never fall. They're the ones who get back up. That real courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing despite it. That true power isn't the ability to hurt. It's the wisdom to heal. And that sometimes, just sometimes, showing mercy is the most revolutionary act there is. Because in a world that constantly tells us to be harder, faster, stronger, more aggressive, the choice to be gentle is radical. The choice to forgive is brave. The choice to believe in second chances is an act of faith. Ethan Wade understood that. And in understanding it, in living it, in proving it was possible, he gave an entire town, and everyone who heard his story, permission to believe it too. That we're not defined by our fastest draw or our biggest mistakes. We're defined by what we choose to do after, by whether we choose vengeance or mercy, domination or service, fear or hope. And in the end, those choices don't just change us, they change the world. One person at a time, one town at a time, one moment of mercy at a time. That was Ethan Wade's legacy. Not the men he'd killed or the reputation he'd earned, but the life he'd spared and the town he'd saved by simply choosing to see the human being behind the gun. And in doing so, he'd shown everyone that the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy. It's turning them into something better, something more. Someone who years later stands at your funeral and says you saved their life by not taking it. That's power. That's strength. That's what it means to truly win. Not by being the fastest, but by being wise enough to know when not to draw at all.